Hope is a peculiar phenomenon, one that I did not truly understand until the universe attempted to teach me its opposite. In the mathematical frameworks of my people, hope was classified as an inefficiency, a deviation from rational assessment that led to suboptimal resource allocation and strategic errors. We had spent 14,000 years perfecting our civilization by eliminating such inefficiencies, building an empire of pure logic and calculated probability.
We charted the stars with precision that lesser species could barely comprehend. We modeled the rise and fall of civilizations with algorithms so refined that prediction became indistinguishable from prophecy. We knew with certainty approaching the absolute exactly how long each species would endure, exactly when each empire would crumble, exactly what circumstances would lead to extinction or transcendence. We were the Verithan Collective, the architects of certainty, and we had never been wrong. Not once in 14 millennia of continuous observation and analysis. Our models had predicted the fall of the Cyrethi Dominion 3 centuries before it occurred. We had calculated the extinction of the Caleth Union 700 years before the last Caleth drew breath. We had mapped the trajectory of every significant civilization in the galaxy with such precision that we no longer bothered to observe current events. We simply consulted our projections and knew what would happen. And then, in the 4,307th year of the third calculation era, our models predicted something that shattered everything we believed about the nature of reality. They predicted the end. Not the end of a civilization, not the extinction of a species, but the end, the termination of all complex life in the galaxy within a span of 47 years. The convergence, we called it, a cascade failure in the fabric of space-time itself, triggered by accumulated dimensional stress from 12 billion years of stellar evolution. The mathematics were elegant, undeniable, and absolutely final. Every civilization in the galaxy would be reduced to constituent atoms. Every memory, every achievement, every dream of every sentient being would simply cease to exist. Hope, in the face of such certainty, was not merely inefficient. It was irrational to the point of pathology. I am Verithan Kale, third architect of Final Assessments, and this is the record of how my people faced the absolute end of everything, and how a species we had dismissed as statistically irrelevant taught us that we had never truly understood hope at all. The first sign of the convergence appeared in the outer resonance, a region of space so distant from galactic center that most species had never bothered to chart it. Our monitoring stations detected it as a subtle distortion in the quantum substrate, a ripple in the fundamental mathematics of reality that should not have been possible according to any known physical law. Anomalous reading from Station Epsilon 7, my assistant announced during what would prove to be the final routine review of our observation network. Dimensional stress indicators exceeding theoretical maximums. I examined the data with the detached interest of someone who had spent 3,000 years cataloging cosmic phenomena. Anomalies were not uncommon in the outer resonance. The region's unusual properties had made it a subject of academic curiosity for centuries. But as I processed the readings, something in the patterns triggered recognition algorithms that I had never expected to activate. Run comparative analysis against archive scenario Omega, I instructed. My assistant's chromatic patterns shifted to confusion, the Verithan equivalent of a frown. Architect, Archive Scenario Omega is a theoretical extinction model. It was developed as a mathematical exercise, not a prediction of actual events.
Run the analysis.
The results appeared on my display in the space of 3 heartbeats, and I felt something I had not experienced in over 2,000 years: genuine surprise. The correlation was not partial, not approximate, it was exact. The readings from Station Epsilon 7 matched Archive Scenario Omega's initial parameters with a precision of 19 decimal places.
The convergence was not theoretical. It was beginning. The weeks that followed remained the most disorienting period of my existence. Our predictive models, refined across 14 millennia of continuous operation, began producing projections that defied everything we believed about probability and causation. The convergence was not merely approaching, it was accelerating, feeding on itself in ways that our mathematics could describe but not explain.
47 years. Primary Architect Verathan Saul announced to the assembled Council of Certainty, their voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction that had defined our civilization since its founding. That is the time frame our projections indicate for complete galactic sterilization. The margin of error is less than 3%. And countermeasures? Council member Verathan Ness inquired, though something in her chromatic patterns suggested she already knew the answer. None exist. The convergence operates on fundamental principles that cannot be altered by any technology currently possessed by any civilization in the galaxy. We have modeled every possible intervention, every theoretical approach, every conceivable application of known physics. All paths lead to the same terminus.
I watched my colleagues process this information. Beings who had spent millennia mastering the art of rational assessment, of eliminating emotional response in favor of logical analysis. For the first time in recorded history, I saw Verathans struggle to maintain their legendary composure.
Then we must prepare for conclusion, Council Member Verathan Thex said finally. Our archives must be preserved in whatever form might survive the convergence. Our knowledge must not be entirely lost. Agreed. Primary Architect Verathan Soul responded. We shall spend our remaining time ensuring that something of value persists beyond the end. It is the only rational course of action.
I should have accepted this conclusion. My training, my experience, my entire existence as a Verathan demanded that I accept the mathematical reality of our situation and respond with appropriate pragmatism. But something in me, some fragment of irrationality that I had never fully excised, refused to simply await termination.
There is one variable we have not fully assessed, I said, speaking out of turn in a way that would normally have resulted in formal censure. The Council's attention shifted to me with expressions ranging from surprise to irritation. "Explain, Primary Architect Verathan," Soul commanded.
The human variable. We have extensive projections for their civilization's development, but our models classify them as Category 7, statistically irrelevant to galactic-scale events. We have not devoted significant analytical resources to understanding their approach to crisis scenarios. Because their approach is irrelevant, Council Member Verathan Ness responded, her chromatic patterns shifting to dismissive amber. Humans have existed as a spacefaring species for less than 3 centuries. Their technology is primitive, their population is insignificant, and their cultural development follows predictable patterns for young civilizations. They will be among the first to succumb to the convergence, not among those capable of addressing it.
Yet their behavior consistently deviates from our projections, I pressed.
In the 17 standard years since we first cataloged them, humans have exceeded predicted technological development by a factor of 3. Their population growth has defied our demographic models. Their political unity has progressed faster than any comparable species in our records.
Anomalies within acceptable variance ranges, Councilmember Verithan Fex interjected. Young civilizations often display erratic development patterns before settling into predictable trajectories.
What if they do not settle? I asked. What if the anomaly is not a deviation from their trajectory, but rather the trajectory itself? The council exchanged glances that communicated skepticism and mild concern for my analytical integrity. But primary architect Verithan Sol, whose position demanded consideration of all variables, made a decision that would prove more significant than any of us could have imagined.
You may investigate the human variable, Verithan Kale. Devote whatever resources you deem necessary to understanding their potential relevance, but do not allow this investigation to distract from the primary objective of archive preservation. The end is certain. We must not waste our remaining time on futile pursuits.
I accepted the assignment with what I hoped was appropriate gratitude, though in truth I was not certain what I expected to find. Humanity was, by every objective measure, precisely what my colleagues described, a young, primitive species whose existence barely registered on the galactic scale. What possible contribution could they make to a crisis that had defeated the accumulated wisdom of 14,000 years?
I traveled to the human core systems with expectations shaped by millennia of experience with young civilizations. I anticipated disorder, inefficiency, political fragmentation, and technological systems barely capable of interstellar travel. I anticipated fear, denial, and the sort of desperate irrationality that characterizes species facing extinction.
What I found was something else entirely.
Earth Station Meridian orbited the human homeworld like a crown of light. Not the elegant crystalline structures favored by Verithan architecture, but something functional, purposeful, and surprisingly sophisticated. The station hummed with activity that seemed chaotic at first observation, but revealed underlying patterns upon closer analysis. Verithan vessel, this is Meridian Control, a human voice announced as my ship approached. We've been expecting you. Please proceed to Docking Bay 17. Ambassador Chen will meet you upon arrival.
Expecting me. The phrase echoed through my consciousness with uncomfortable implications. Our arrival had not been announced through official channels. I had traveled under observation protocols that should have rendered my presence undetectable. Yet somehow the humans had known I was coming. Ambassador Chen was a woman of perhaps 50 human years, middle-aged by their limited biological standards, with features that my cultural database classified as East Asian in origin. She waited at the docking bay with 2 aides, her posture relaxed, her expression carrying something that my emotion recognition algorithms identified as genuine welcome.
Architect Verithan Kale, she said, executing a slight bow that my database indicated was a gesture of respect. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. You knew of my arrival, I stated, allowing confusion to color my chromatic display. Our observation protocols are designed to be undetectable by technology at your developmental stage.
Ambassador Chen smiled, a human expression that could indicate amusement, warmth, or in some contexts, danger.
We've had 17 years to study Verithan observation methods, architect. Plenty of time to develop countermeasures. She gestured toward a corridor leading away from the docking bay. Please, walk with me. I understand you're investigating our potential response to the convergence.
I followed, my analytical processes struggling to reconcile what I was experiencing with my expectations. You are aware of the convergence.
We detected it 11 years ago. Different methodology than yours. We were tracking dimensional stress patterns for unrelated research and stumbled onto the cascade indicators by accident. Our initial models were crude compared to what you've developed, but we've refined them significantly since then.
11 years, I repeated, my surprise genuine. You have known for 11 years, and yet your civilization shows no signs of the social disruption typically associated with extinction awareness.
That's because we're not planning on going extinct, Architect. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing agricultural policy rather than the death of everything. Come, there's something I'd like to show you.
The command center she led me to was buried deep within the station, protected by security protocols that my sensors could not penetrate. When the final doors opened, I found myself in a room filled with displays, holographic projections, and humans working with an intensity that bordered on frenetic.
But it was the central display that captured my attention, a three-dimensional model of the galaxy, overlaid with mathematical projections that I recognized immediately.
You have mapped the convergence, I said, studying the intricate web of dimensional stress lines that crisscrossed the display. Your projections are remarkably sophisticated for a civilization of your developmental stage.
We learn fast when we have to, Ambassador Chen replied, and we've had excellent teachers. She gestured to a section of the display that I had not initially noticed, a cluster of calculations that bore unmistakable Verithan mathematical notation. Your broadcasts are encrypted, but encryption is just a puzzle. We've been studying Verithan analytical methods for the past decade.
You decoded our secure communications. The implications of this statement were staggering. Verithan encryption protocols were considered unbreakable by any known technology.
Not all of them, just the ones related to the convergence. Ambassador Chen's smile faded, replaced by an expression of grave seriousness. We needed to understand the problem before we could begin solving it. The problem cannot be solved, I replied automatically, my training asserting itself. Our projections are absolute. Every possible intervention leads to the same outcome. Your projections are based on known physics, Ambassador Chen countered, known being the operative word. What happens when you introduce variables that don't exist in your models?
Such variables would require technology beyond current theoretical limits. No civilization in the galaxy possesses.
No civilization in the galaxy has ever faced extinction with 11 years to prepare and absolute certainty about the threat, Ambassador Chen interrupted. You're projecting based on historical patterns, Architect. But we don't fit your historical patterns. We've never fit your historical patterns.
She gestured to a young human male who approached with a data tablet. Dr. Okonkwo, please provide Architect Verithan Kale with an overview of Project Prometheus. The young scientist, barely an adult by human standards, activated a series of holographic displays with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to revolutionary thinking. Project Prometheus is our response to the convergence, Architect. It's based on a simple premise. If the laws of physics, as currently understood, cannot prevent extinction, then we need to change the laws of physics. I waited for elaboration, certain that I had misunderstood. You cannot change physical laws. They are fundamental properties of reality.
They're fundamental properties of this reality, Dr. Okonkwo corrected. But the convergence itself demonstrates that reality is not as stable as we assumed. The dimensional stress causing the cascade is essentially reality trying to resolve contradictions in its own structure. What if we could influence how those contradictions are resolved?
The mathematics that followed were unlike anything I had ever encountered, a fusion of Verithan analytical methods, human theoretical physics, and something else entirely. Something that my training could not classify, and my experience could not contextualize.
This is speculation, I said finally, studying projections that suggested outcomes my people would have classified as impossible. Theoretical frameworks unsupported by empirical evidence.
It was speculation, Ambassador Chan acknowledged, 3 years ago. Since then, we've conducted 1,700 experiments in dimensional manipulation. We've achieved practical results that your models would classify as physically impossible. And we've developed technology that your civilization has never conceived because it operates on principles you've never bothered to explore.
If this is accurate, why have you not shared it with the galactic community? If you possess knowledge that could address the convergence?
Because the galactic community has spent the past 17 years ignoring us, Ambassador Chen replied, and for the first time I detected something other than calm composure in her voice, something that might have been anger or perhaps grief. We attempted to share our convergence findings 8 years ago. We transmitted our data to every major civilization, including yours. We requested collaboration, resource sharing, coordinated research efforts. Do you know what response we received?
I searched my memory for records of human communications during the relevant period. I have no records of such transmissions.
Of course you don't. They were classified as irrelevant and deleted by your automated filtering systems. A Category 7 civilization attempting to contribute to galactic-scale crisis analysis? Obviously not worth consideration. Her expression shifted to something that my cultural database struggled to interpret. Every major power in the galaxy received our warning. Every major power ignored it. So we stopped asking for help and started preparing to save ourselves.
Save yourselves, I repeated. You are speaking of survival on a species level while the galaxy faces total extinction.
No, Architect. I'm speaking of saving everyone. We just stopped asking permission to do it.
The days that followed challenged every assumption I had carried with me from Verithan Prime. The humans did not merely tolerate my presence, they actively included me in their planning sessions, their research reviews, their strategic discussions. They shared information that any rational species would have guarded as existential secrets.
You trust me with this knowledge, I observed during one such session, as human scientists debated the fine points of dimensional manipulation that my people would have considered heretical. I am an observer from a civilization that has dismissed you as irrelevant. I could transmit everything I learn to my superiors. I could potentially compromise your entire operation.
You could, Commander James Harrison agreed. He was the military liaison to Project Prometheus, a weathered man whose eyes carried the weight of decisions that my biographical databases suggested had not always been easy. But you won't.
You cannot know that with certainty.
No, I can't. But I know that you came here looking for something, Architect, something your people's perfect models couldn't provide. He leaned forward, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that I found unexpectedly disconcerting. You came here looking for hope.
The word struck me like a physical force. Hope. The inefficiency that Verithan had spent 14 millennia eliminating from our cognitive frameworks. The irrationality that led to suboptimal resource allocation. The pathology that my people had classified as the defining weakness of lesser civilizations.
Hope is not a Verithan value, I replied,
But my chromatic display betrayed me with patterns that even humans could interpret as uncertainty. "Maybe it should be," Commander Harrison said quietly, "because hope is the only thing that makes any of this possible. Hope is what drives a species facing certain extinction to spend 11 years trying to find a way out. Hope is what convinces scientists to pursue theories that every established model says are impossible. Hope is what allows humans to disagree with the universe itself." "The universe does not accept disagreement," I countered. "Physical laws are not subject to emotional appeals." "You're right. The universe doesn't care about our feelings. But here's what we've learned, Architect. The universe also doesn't care about our models. It doesn't care about our predictions. It doesn't care about what we think is possible or impossible. It simply is. And that means that every time we discover something new, every time we push beyond what we thought were fundamental limits, we're not disagreeing with the universe. We're discovering that the universe is bigger than we imagined." He gestured to the displays around us, where thousands of humans worked on problems that my civilization had declared unsolvable. "Your people decided that hope was an inefficiency because it led to wasted effort on impossible goals. But humanity discovered that hope is what drives us to redefine what's possible. Every impossible thing that humans have ever achieved started with someone refusing to accept that it couldn't be done." "Your history contains no precedent for what you are attempting," I pointed out. "No species has ever survived a convergence-level event." "No species has ever had to, and no species has ever had 11 years of warning and the stubbornness to refuse to give up." Commander Harrison smiled, a human expression that I was beginning to understand carried depths my cultural databases had failed to capture. "We're humanity, Architect. We specialize in doing things that have never been done." 3 months into my observation, the humans invited me to witness a demonstration that they promised would alter my understanding of possibility. The test facility occupied an asteroid in the outer reaches of the human solar system, a location chosen, Ambassador Chen explained, because the experiments involved energies that would be catastrophic if released near inhabited space. "What we're about to attempt has never been done before," Dr. Okonkwo said, as we observed the preparations from a shielded observation platform. "We've conducted scaled tests, simulation runs, theoretical validations, but this is the first full-power demonstration of dimensional realignment technology." "Dimensional realignment?" I repeated. "You are proposing to alter the fundamental structure of space-time." "Not alter, stabilize. The convergence is essentially reality tearing itself apart due to accumulated stress. What we've developed is a way to release that stress in a controlled manner, redirecting the cascade into patterns that reinforce rather than destroy." He pulled up a schematic that made my analytical system strain to process. "If it works, we can prevent the convergence entirely. If it doesn't, the cascade acceleration could reduce the timeline from years to days," I completed. "You are gambling with the survival of everything on untested technology." "We're gambling because the alternative is guaranteed extinction," Commander Harrison interjected. "A chance is better than no chance." "My people would consider this approach profoundly irrational." "Your people have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of rational acceptance," Ambassador Chen said quietly. "But acceptance isn't always the rational choice. Sometimes the only rational choice is to fight, even when every model says you'll lose." The test began with a low hum that I felt more than heard, a vibration in the fabric of reality itself. The human machinery came alive with energies that my sensors could barely detect, forces operating on principles that Verithan physics had never contemplated. And then something happened that my training, my experience, and my 14,000-year-old civilization had taught me was absolutely impossible. A region of space, approximately 300 meters in diameter, began to glow with light that existed outside the visible spectrum, light that my sensors could not classify because it corresponded to no known electromagnetic phenomenon. The dimensional stress readings in that region, which had been climbing steadily in the weeks before the test, began to fall, not slowly, not marginally, but precipitously, dropping by orders of magnitude in the space of seconds. "It's working," Dr. Okonkwo breathed, his voice carrying the particular quality of a being witnessing something that should not be possible. "The stress is dissipating. The cascade is reversing." I watched the readings with something that I could only describe as awe, a response that my Verithan conditioning should have made impossible. The mathematics were undeniable. The humans had not merely slowed the convergence, they had reversed it. In a localized region of space, they had achieved something that my people had declared absolutely impossible.
This is one test, I managed finally, my analytical processes struggling to incorporate what I had witnessed into my understanding of reality. One localized demonstration. The convergence spans the entire galaxy.
"Which is why we've spent the past decade building a network," Ambassador Chen replied, her smile carrying quiet satisfaction. 3,700 stations positioned across galactic space, each one capable of the same dimensional realignment you just witnessed, coordinated through a communication system that operates outside normal space-time, allowing simultaneous activation across distances that should make such coordination impossible.
3,700? I repeated, the number staggering in its implications. The resources required for such an undertaking.
"Everything we have," Commander Harrison confirmed. "Every ship, every station, every manufacturing facility. Every human who could be spared from essential functions has been working on this for the past decade. We've restructured our entire civilization around a single purpose: survival."
Your people know? The general population is aware of the convergence.
They've known from the beginning. We don't keep extinction-level secrets from our own species. Ambassador Chen's expression shifted to something more complex. There was panic at first, fear, denial, all the responses you would expect. But humans have a peculiar trait, Architect. When we're told something is impossible, we tend to take it as a challenge rather than a verdict.
You mobilized your entire species, I said, the magnitude of what they had accomplished beginning to crystallize in my understanding. Every individual, every resource, every capability, all directed toward a single goal that your own models classified as impossible.
Not impossible, Dr. Okonkwo corrected. Unprecedented. There's a difference. Impossible means it cannot be done regardless of effort. Unprecedented means it's never been done before. We're very good at unprecedented.
I returned to Verithan Prime 3 weeks later, carrying data that would fundamentally alter my civilization's understanding of both the convergence and the species we had dismissed as irrelevant.
The Council of Certainty received my report with responses ranging from skepticism to outright dismissal.
"These readings are anomalous," Council member Verithan Ness declared, studying the data I had provided. "They suggest outcomes that violate fundamental physical principles."
"The readings are accurate," I replied. "I observed the demonstration directly. The humans have developed technology that operates on principles outside our current theoretical frameworks. Principles that you cannot explain or validate through established methodology, primary architect Variathan Saul observed. You are asking us to accept extraordinary claims based on observations that contradict 14,000 years of accumulated knowledge.
I am asking you to consider that our accumulated knowledge may be incomplete, I countered. The humans have achieved results that we classified as impossible. If our classifications were wrong about this, what else might we be wrong about?
The probability of a Category 7 civilization developing technology superior to our own is statistically negligible, Council Member Verathan Thex stated flatly. The probability of them solving a problem that has defeated our most advanced analytical frameworks is effectively zero.
Yet they have done so. The evidence is undeniable. The evidence is subject to interpretation. You observed phenomena that you could not explain using our theoretical models. That does not mean the phenomena represent what the humans claim. It may simply mean that their demonstration was fraudulent, or that you were deceived through methods we have not yet identified.
I felt something that I had not experienced in centuries, frustration with my own people's rigidity. They invited me to observe freely. They shared their research, their calculations, their methodology. If they intended deception, why would they provide materials that would expose their deception upon analysis? Perhaps because they knew our analytical frameworks would dismiss findings that contradicted our assumptions, primary architect Verathan Saul said quietly. Perhaps because they understood that our certainty would blind us to evidence that challenged our models.
The council fell silent, considering the primary architect's words.
You are suggesting that our greatest strength has become our greatest weakness, Council Member Verathan Ness said finally. That our commitment to rational assessment has made us incapable of recognizing truth that does not fit our expectations.
I am suggesting that we have forgotten something essential, the primary architect replied. We eliminated hope from our cognitive frameworks because we believed it led to inefficiency. But the humans have demonstrated that hope can drive accomplishment beyond what rational assessment predicts. Perhaps hope is not an inefficiency to be eliminated, but a capability we have failed to develop.
The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Verathan civilization was not designed for rapid adaptation. Our decision-making processes were optimized for careful analysis rather than urgent response. But eventually, faced with evidence that could not be rationally dismissed, the Council reached a conclusion that would have been unthinkable mere months earlier.
We would collaborate with the humans.
What followed was the most intensive period of interspecies cooperation in galactic history. The humans did not simply share their technology, they integrated Verathan analytical capabilities into their planning, combining our computational power with their creative approach to problem-solving. Other species, initially skeptical of claims about both the convergence and the potential solution, gradually joined the effort as evidence accumulated.
7,300 stations now operational, Dr. Okonkwo reported during a coordination meeting that included representatives from 37 species. Verathan manufacturing facilities have doubled our production capacity. Calith engineering teams have improved efficiency by approximately 18%. Cyrethi logistics networks have solved distribution challenges that would have taken us years to address independently.
Convergence cascade is accelerating, a Verathan analyst added.
Current projections indicate terminal phase initiation in approximately 7 standard months.
Then we need to be operational in 6, Commander Harrison said. Is that achievable? With current resource allocation and effort levels, no, the analyst replied. We would require an additional 1,200 stations and an 18% improvement in coordination efficiency. Then we increase resource allocation and effort levels, Ambassador Chen said simply. This is not a negotiation with acceptable margins. We either succeed completely or fail completely. I observed the response to her words. Beings from dozens of species, representing civilizations that had spent millennia in competition or outright conflict, nodding in agreement. The convergence had accomplished something that diplomacy had failed to achieve for thousands of years: genuine unity of purpose across the galaxy. There is a human concept that I have been studying, I said, speaking for the first time in the meeting. A concept that my people eliminated from our cognitive frameworks long ago because we believed it represented inefficiency. Ambassador Chen turned to me with an expression of gentle curiosity. What concept, architect? Hope, I replied. The belief that positive outcomes are possible, even when available evidence suggests otherwise. My people classified this as irrational, as a deviation from proper analytical function. But I have come to understand that hope is not irrationality. It is the foundation upon which rational effort is built.
You cannot work toward a goal that you believe is impossible, Commander Harrison observed. Hope is what allows effort to exist.
Precisely. And for 14,000 years, my people have excelled at predicting what cannot be done, but we have forgotten how to imagine what might be possible. I looked around the room at the assembled representatives of species who had set aside their differences to face annihilation together. The humans have taught us something that our certainty blinded us to, that the universe is not defined by what models predict, but by what beings choose to create.
The final months before the convergence's terminal phase were a testament to what unified effort could accomplish. Species that had been enemies for longer than humanity had existed worked together with seamless coordination. Resources flowed across the galaxy according to need rather than politics. Knowledge was shared without restriction, each breakthrough building on contributions from dozens of civilizations. And at the center of it all, guiding the effort with quiet competence and unshakable determination, were the humans. Network Status Report. Ambassador Chen requested during the final coordination session 3 days before the projected terminal phase.
9,417 stations operational, Dr. Okonkwo replied. 87% of galactic space covered by overlapping fields. Coordination systems tested and verified. We are as ready as we will ever be.
Remaining gaps? Commander Harrison asked.
14 regions without full coverage, mostly in the outer resonance. We've positioned mobile units to provide emergency support, but if the cascade propagates through those areas before our fields activate, we may experience localized failures.
Acceptable risk?
Unknown. We've never done this before.
Commander Harrison nodded slowly. Then we proceed. If there are gaps in our coverage, we'll address them as they emerge. Waiting for perfect conditions means waiting for extinction. I watched the humans as they made final preparations, and I found myself understanding something that had eluded me throughout my investigation. Their strength was not their technology, not their analytical capabilities, not even their remarkable capacity for innovation. Their strength was their refusal to accept defeat. Every species in the galaxy, when faced with my people's projections, had responded with acceptance. They had prepared for ending, made peace with extinction, sought to preserve what could be preserved. The humans had done none of these things. They had looked at certainty itself and said simply, no.
That single word, that refusal to accept what every rational analysis indicated was inevitable, had changed everything. The terminal phase began precisely as our projections predicted, a cascade of dimensional stress emanating from the outer resonance and propagating toward galactic center at velocities that defied conventional physics. Within hours, the first inhabited systems reported distortions in fundamental forces, the early symptoms of reality beginning to tear itself apart.
And then the human network activated.
9,417 stations, each one generating a field of dimensional realignment that our best models had classified as impossible, synchronized their activation across distances that should have made coordination impractical. The effect was immediate, visible on every sensor array in the galaxy. The cascade that had been accelerating toward universal destruction began to slow, then stop, then reverse.
Dimensional stress decreasing across all monitored sectors, a Verithan analyst reported, their voice carrying something that our species had not expressed in millennia: wonder. Cascade propagation has halted, reversal patterns consistent with theoretical projections.
We're seeing localized stress spikes in grid sectors 7 through 12, Dr. Okonkwo announced. The outer resonance gaps. The cascade is trying to find pathways around our fields.
Deploying mobile units, Commander Harrison responded. All available vessels to coordinates being transmitted now. We fill those gaps or we lose everything. I watched as humans threw themselves into the breach, literally in some cases, as pilots maneuvered their ships into positions that would almost certainly be fatal if the cascade breached their fields. They did not hesitate, did not calculate odds, did not consider personal survival. They simply acted, each one choosing to risk everything because the alternative was unacceptable.
Stress spike in Sector 9 reaching critical levels, an analyst warned. If we don't reinforce that position in the next 6 minutes...
I'm on it, a human voice interrupted. The display identified the speaker as Captain Maria Santos, commanding a vessel that was at least 12 minutes from the critical sector at maximum acceleration.
Captain, the mathematics, I began.
Can be wrong, she interrupted. We've proven that today. And even if they're not, I'm going to try anyway.
What happened next should have been impossible. Captain Santos pushed her vessel beyond every rated limit, achieving acceleration that the ship's designers had calculated would result in structural failure. She arrived in Sector 9 with seconds to spare, her field activating just as the cascade threatened to break through.
Sector 9 stabilized, Dr. Okonkwo reported, his voice tinged with something between disbelief and profound respect. The gap is closed.
That was impossible, I said. The acceleration required
was impossible until she did it, Commander Harrison replied simply. That's how humans work, Architect. We don't accept impossible. We just haven't done it yet.
The battle against the convergence lasted for 18 hours. 18 hours of constant crisis management, of gaps appearing and being filled, of impossible feats becoming necessary and then becoming real. When the final readings came in, when the dimensional stress across the galaxy had been reduced to levels that posed no threat to continued existence, the command center fell silent. And then the celebration began. Beings from dozens of species embraced, wept, shouted in languages that had no common translation but shared the same meaning. The convergence was over. The galaxy would survive. Everything that had ever existed would continue to exist because a single species, a young, primitive, statistically irrelevant species, had refused to accept that hope was an inefficiency.
I found Ambassador Chen standing apart from the celebration, her gaze fixed on a display that showed the galaxy in its entirety, stable, safe, preserved.
"You saved everything," I said, standing beside her. "Every species, every world, every memory and dream and possibility. You saved it all."
"We didn't do it alone," she replied quietly. "Every species contributed. Every civilization played a role. But you led. You refused to accept the verdict that every other species had accepted. You disagreed with the end of everything, and you made your disagreement reality." Ambassador Chen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of everything her species had endured and everything they had accomplished.
My people have a long history of being told that something is impossible, she said, that we're too weak, too primitive, too insignificant to matter, that the forces arrayed against us are too powerful to overcome, that our only rational choice is to accept defeat and make peace with oblivion. She turned to face me, and I saw in her eyes the same quiet determination that had driven humanity through 11 years of impossible effort. We've never been very good at accepting that.
"Why?" I asked. The same question I had posed throughout my investigation, but now carrying different weight. Why do you refuse to accept what rational analysis clearly indicates?
"Because rational analysis only measures what has been," she replied. "It cannot measure what might be. It cannot account for determination, for creativity, for the stubbornness of beings who simply refuse to die." Her smile carried millennia of human history, of struggles faced and overcome, of obstacles that had seemed insurmountable until they were surmounted. The universe told us that hope was irrelevant. We disagreed, and today our disagreement saved everything.
I returned to Verithan Prime as a different being than I had been when I departed. The Council of Certainty convened to receive my final report, but the gathering felt different than any I had attended in my 3,000 years of service. The beings assembled before me were the same, but something in their manner had shifted, a crack in the certainty that had defined our civilization since its founding. "The convergence has been neutralized," I reported. "Dimensional stress across the galaxy has been reduced to levels that pose no threat to continued existence. The cascade that our models predicted would destroy everything has been reversed through technology developed by a species we classified as statistically irrelevant." "The humans," Primary Architect Verithan Sol said quietly. "The humans. They achieved what our 14,000 years of accumulated knowledge declared impossible. They did so not through superior analytical capability, but through a quality that we eliminated from our cognitive frameworks millennia ago." "Hope," Council Member Verithan Ness said, the word emerging awkwardly from a being unaccustomed to expressing such concepts. "Hope. The belief that positive outcomes are possible, even when evidence suggests otherwise. The refusal to accept that mathematical projections are absolute verdicts. The determination to create futures that models predict cannot exist." I looked at my colleagues,
beings who had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of rational assessment, of eliminating emotional interference, of accepting mathematical reality without resistance, and I saw in them the same uncertainty that had been growing in me since my first encounter with humanity.
Our models failed, I continued, not because they were technically flawed, but because they could not account for the variable that the humans represent. They could not predict what happens when a species refuses to accept prediction as destiny. They could not calculate the effects of hope applied with sufficient determination over sufficient time.
You are suggesting that our entire approach to assessment requires revision, Council Member Verathan Thex observed. I am suggesting that we have been incomplete. We mastered the science of predicting what will happen if nothing changes. We never developed the science of understanding what happens when beings choose to change everything. The Council fell silent, each member processing implications that would reshape our civilization's understanding of itself and its place in the galaxy. The humans have invited us to participate in ongoing collaboration, Primary Architect Verathan Sol said finally. They offer partnership in research, development, and exploration. They suggest that the combination of our analytical capabilities and their adaptability might produce results that neither species could achieve independently.
What do you recommend, Architect Verathan Kale? Council Member Verathan Ness asked. You have studied them most extensively. You understand them better than any of us. I considered the question carefully, searching for words that could convey what I had learned. I recommend that we accept, I said, not because collaboration offers strategic advantages, though it does, not because our analytical capabilities complement their creativity, though they do. I recommend acceptance because the humans have demonstrated something that we desperately need to learn. Which is? That certainty is not wisdom, that models are tools, not truths, that the universe is not defined by what we predict, but by what we create. I looked at my colleagues, at beings I had served alongside for millennia, and I saw the first stirrings of possibility in their ancient eyes. All hope was lost. Every analysis confirmed it. Every projection validated it. The end was certain, absolute, inescapable. And then humanity disagreed, and their disagreement saved everything. Primary Architect Verathan Sol rose slowly, their chromatic patterns displaying something that I had never seen in a Verathan. Wonder mixed with humility. Then let us learn to disagree, they said. Let us learn what it means to hope. The vote was unanimous. In the centuries that followed, the galaxy transformed in ways that our models never predicted, and for once we were grateful for the error. Humanity did not seek dominion over the civilizations that had dismissed them. They sought partnership. They did not demand tribute for saving everything. They offered collaboration. They did not hold grudges against species that had ignored their warnings. They welcomed them as allies. And everywhere they went, they carried with them the lesson that had rewritten the future of existence itself, that hope is not weakness, not irrationality, not a deviation from proper function. Hope is the foundation upon which everything is built. Hope is what allows beings to pursue goals that evidence suggests are impossible. Hope is what drives the universe forward, one refusal to accept defeat at a time. I am Verathan Kale, now serving as primary architect of the Coalition of Tomorrow, an organization founded on the principle that no species' potential should be assessed as irrelevant, that no crisis should be accepted as inevitable, that no prediction should be treated as destiny.
My people lived for 14,000 years in certainty, building models of what would be and accepting their verdicts without resistance. We predicted the rises and falls of civilizations with precision approaching prophecy. We knew with absolute confidence exactly what the future would hold.
And then we met a species that did not accept our predictions, a species that looked at the end of everything and said simply, no. A species that disagreed with certainty itself and made their disagreement the foundation of survival.
All hope was lost. Lost so completely that the most sophisticated analytical civilization in the galaxy had accepted extinction as mathematical fact.
Humanity disagreed. And everything that exists, everything that dreams, everything that hopes and struggles and reaches toward tomorrow, all of it endures because one stubborn, primitive, magnificent species refused to accept that hope was irrelevant.
All hope was lost. Humanity disagreed.
And the universe learned that disagreement can save everything.